So yeah, Thermaltake has provided their new Tower 900 case, which we'll look at in a moment. But they've also provided not one, but two of their hard pipe. What is it? It's the Pacific RL360 kit. So we have not one, but they're quite heavy. Two of these. So it'll be a dual loop system. And yeah, it's probably going to take a fair bit of time to put together, but we're going to get started. For this video, we'll look at all the parts, because I'm not even 100% sure of everything that's going into it. There is a lot of hardware, but it's all worked out and been delivered, so we'll get through it. So yeah, there's these two kits, which you will have, if you've watched the P3 build series, you will have seen what's in these kits, but basically you get a 360mm radiator, pump and a large reservoir, 3 fans with fan controller, number of fittings, your hard tubes, CPU water block, and just all the stuff to connect that, and some liquid. So yeah, we'll end up with 2 CPU blocks. We only need 1. I'll quickly just go through it actually.
Victory for the Forsaken.
So we have a pair of these very thick 360mm radiators, and they're going to go in either side of the case, but we'll look at that shortly. I believe both kits come with the red liquid, though we won't be using the red liquid for this build. The colour scheme will be, I think, black, white and blue. Similar pump to what we used last time. The Pacific W1 water block, which is different to the water block we used for the Core P3 build. This one isn't the acrylic block, so not quite as flashy, but still cool looking block, and it will do the trick nicely. You got something to jumpstart your power supply, so you can test the loop without powering up all your components, so nothing will be shorted if there is a leak. And we have a number of fittings. These will be the fittings that come in the kit. I think Thermaltake have provided a few extra fittings, so we'll check that in a moment. And a trio of their Ring 120mm RGB fans with the fan controller, which will be somewhere in the package. Oh, it's probably in the box actually. Anyway, they're cool, and some hard pipes. So that will be useful when we get to building. I wonder if they're going to be long enough. I've got a couple of longer ones somewhere. We may have to use them, because I don't know if they're going to be long enough for the Tower 900. And when I rip this case out in a minute, you'll see what I'm talking about. So basically we've got double of everything you've just seen.
The battle begins in 10 seconds.
Not sure what's in this box, it's very light. Looks like we just have this in here, whatever this is. These are the same TT mod sleeve cables that we used for the P3 build, so they're the black and blue ones. So that will help finish the build off. And we have a smaller but much heavier box. Okay, so we have very cool looking white cooler here. Very cool. Another bottle of red, which is interesting because I'm pretty sure I'm meant to be using black and white. So I'm going to have to double check my notes on that and then speak to Thermaltake. Ah, they've actually upgraded us to the Pacific W3 block. So I looked at the W1 block a moment ago. Looks like we're using... Oh, we are. Awesome. We have the acrylic block, which is what we used last time. It looks very awesome. So we won't be using this block. Yeah, the nice acrylic block. Last time we stuck some clear LEDs underneath, and it lit the block up and the liquid inside it, and that looked really cool. One of the coolest effects of the whole build, actually. Okay, a few more plugs. They could be useful. A couple more fittings. And what do we have here? Ah, some 90-degree fittings. Wow, a lot. A lot of 90-degree fittings. But for a dual loop system, we're probably going to need quite a few. So as you can see, we're using chrome fittings for this one, and there's one of the 90-degree bends. So yeah, the liquid I'm going to have to look into, because I'm pretty sure we're meant to be using white and black. And part of the reason that is because this is the motherboard we'll be using for the build. So this is Gigabyte's new Aorus brand, Z270 motherboard, and it is the Z270X Gaming 7. So there's the box there. And yeah, it's an awesome looking motherboard. Has what looks like it's got some cool LED lighting between the dim slots there. I believe there's some LED lighting below the PCI Express slots and some up here in the I/O cover. So yeah, a very cool looking motherboard, and that'll be the center of our build. So the grand finale, what this is going to be built in is the Tower 900. Now I don't know if you guys have seen or heard about this case yet. It's a brand new case from Thermaltake. Probably their biggest ever. And yeah, it's called the Tower 900. We have the white or snow edition version of the case. And the box weighs about 30 kilos. I'll show you why in a minute when you see the size of it. So it's got 3 thick tempered glass panels. Oh, don't even think that will fit in the frame. How about that if I manage to fit the whole thing in? As you can see, it is a massive case. Well, it's a massive box, but I presume the case inside is fairly large as well. Let's take it apart and find out. So, that there is the Tower 900. Oh. Jeez. I'm gonna have to get a lot fitter if I plan on moving this thing around more in the future. So, Gigabyte's new Z270 motherboard. It's probably going to look quite small in there. Probably orientated something like that, about there. But yeah, plenty of room for expansion. We shouldn't have any trouble at all fitting the dual loop system in there. Plenty of room to work. I'm very, very keen to see how it all looks when it's done. But yeah, this little bar fridge definitely makes for a very cool case. But it's not something you're going to want to be moving ever, really. Pretty much build it where you're going to put it and leave it there, because yeah, it's heavy. I suppose if you remove the tempered glass panels, that would reduce the weight significantly if you had to move it a lot, because I can't even begin to imagine how heavy this thing is going to be once we have all the hardware inside. And the liquid, the radiators, the pumps, graphics card, hard drive, the whole lot. It's going to be nudging, I reckon, 50 kilos full. It'll be interesting, we might have to try and weigh it. So I will be documenting the whole build process, but right now I have to be honest, I really have no idea how I'm going to route all the tubes and connect everything up. Yeah, so I'll probably just play that one by ear, see how we go. I'll probably do what we did with the Core P3 build, and that is fit the motherboard, the graphics card, all the hardware, and then work out, you know, well, put the reservoir in the pump, the radiators, all that sort of stuff, and then sort of, yeah, start to visualize how I'm going to connect everything up and what will look best. But yeah, that'll probably be in part 2 or 3 of this series. I'm not quite sure how many parts there'll be. It really depends on how long it takes me to build this thing. I really have no idea at this stage, but we'll get into it and we'll see where we end up. So, with that, I think we've had a good look at most of the bits. There'll still be, well, there's things like the memory. Not quite sure what I'll be using there just yet. We also have the power supply. I'll probably be using something around an 850 watt model or thereabouts, but we'll see. Then I have to pick an SSD. Probably use something like the Samsung 960 Pro. What else have we got to work out? Then just some hard drives, some bigger hard drives for storage. And yeah, for the graphics card, I won't be using the GTX 1080 or the Titan XP for this build. I will be using just a lowly 1070, so we'll have to make do with that, but I'm sure it'll be fine. And yeah, I'm not really sure what the purpose or point of this build will be, apart from the fact that it's just going to be awesome. So what more do you need, right? Anyway, that's all for this one. I expect an update with some build progress very shortly. So anyway, I'll catch you guys next time. See ya. Hey guys, welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today's video is all about memory, namely the DDR4 variety. When it comes to buying DDR4 memory, there's a few things you want to keep in mind, such as speed, capacity, latency, and what was I talking about again? Oh, that's right, memory. Anyway, for today's video, I'm going to assume you've taken the plunge, and by that I mean you've decided to buy an Intel Kaby Lake processor. Perhaps you're coming from a Sandy Bridge or even an AMD FX processor. Well, whatever the case is, for some crazy reason you've decided to upgrade now and not wait for AMD's Ryzen. If that is the case, then DDR4 memory might be new to you, as the aforementioned platforms use the older DDR3 memory standard. So in this video, I'm going to show you what kind of DDR4 memory you should be on the hunt for. This guide will also apply for Skylake owners as well, since Kaby Lake and Skylake processors have pretty much the same memory requirements. The focus is really going to be on memory frequency and latency rather than capacity. Testing capacity is kind of its own kettle of fish, if you will. It really, how much memory you will require depends on the rest of your system specifications, and probably more importantly, what it is that you plan on doing with the computer. As a rule of thumb, in 2017, we would suggest a minimum of 8GB of memory for gamers, while 16GB should be the new target. 16GB kits are actually better value anyway, as pricing starts at $70 US. Meanwhile, the cheapest dual-channel 8GB kit start at about $45. As always, it really comes down to your budget. If you're going with a Pentium or Core i3 processor, then skimping on an 8GB kit might make sense. On that note, if you're buying a budget processor or even a non-K Core i5/i7 processor and pairing it with a non-Z chipset, that is to say anything that isn't the Z170 or Z270, then memory frequency becomes less of an issue. So H170, H110 and B150 chipsets, for example, all support a maximum DDR4 memory speed of just 2133 MHz. The H270 and B250 chipsets are also memory frequency limited. The 6th gen Intel processors are again limited to 2133 MHz, while the 7th gen processors can use DDR4 2400 memory. As a side note, DDR4 2133 memory doesn't actually operate at 2133 MHz, as advertised by pretty much every manufacturer and board partner. As this is double data rate memory, it actually operates at 1066 MHz. But rather than be technical and go against the grain, we will submit to the marketing lingo and just call it 2133 MHz to avoid confusing anyone. Right, so assuming you have either a Z170 or Z270 motherboard, then there is going to be a huge range of DDR4 memory speeds available to you. Speeds ranging from DDR4 2133 all out to DDR4 4000 and even faster. Realistically though, you're really going to be deciding between modules rated at 2400 MHz to about 3400 MHz. The other things to consider here are the price and latency, the latter of which is often described as memory timings. Anyway, giving us a clear picture of how timings and frequency impact performance of the new Kaby Lake processors, I have done a little benchmarking. Before we jump to the game results, here's a quick look at the impact memory frequency has on bandwidth. Using DDR4 2133 memory, we are limited to 22.8 GB per second. Meanwhile, moving to 2666 memory, the bandwidth increased by 21%. We see a further 20% bump in bandwidth when jumping to the DDR4 3600 memory. That said, this sweet spot does appear to be DDR4 3400 memory. This is the last test we're going to be looking at before the gaming benchmarks, I promise. It's interesting to see how the increased bandwidth impacts performance in the 7-zip application. Although the gains are consistent, we only see a 3% improvement in performance when jumping all the way from DDR4 2133 memory to the fastest memory tested DDR4 3600. So not all applications will benefit greatly from the increased memory bandwidth. Okay, so first up we have Battlefield 1, which we are testing with a Titan XP at 1080p. We do see consistent gains as the memory frequency increases, though it has to be said that there is just a 7% increase in performance for the minimum frame rate when going from DDR4 2133 all the way up to DDR4 3600. Another game I tested was Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, and unfortunately it didn't become apparent that there was a 125 FPS cap until I was well into the testing. Since I had the results, I decided to include them anyway, as they could be useful once we move to the 4K resolution. Finally, the last game I tested was Gears of War 4, which is known to be a very demanding game on the CPU. Here we see a reasonable 13% boost in performance when going from DDR4 2133 to DDR4 3600. Still, I was using a Titan XP here at 1080p, so you do have to wonder what the gains would be like under more realistic conditions. Well, these numbers look quite different to the Battlefield 1 results seen previously. Here we see virtually no difference in performance between the DDR4 2133 and DDR4 3600 memory when gaming with the Titan XP at 4K. Call of Duty Infinite Warfare has now dropped down to 75 FPS, and while that is well below the 125 FPS cap we previously saw, increasing the memory speed didn't improve the frame rate. Even in Gears of War 4, where we previously saw a 13% performance boost from the lowest clocked memory to the fastest, we now just see a 3.5% variation in performance at 4K. So the moment the GPU becomes the performance limiting factor, which is almost always when gaming, increasing the CPU's memory bandwidth does little to nothing to aid system performance. For the most part, high-speed DDR4 isn't really going to improve the gaming experience. Perhaps those rocking a higher refresh rate monitor might benefit from the high memory frequency, but for everyone else it isn't really necessary. One last thing I just want to look at briefly are memory timings. As you can see, as the memory timings are relaxed, the memory bandwidth slowly falls away. The impact timings have on bandwidth isn't nearly as significant as the frequency though. From CL16 to CL18 we only see a 2% reduction in bandwidth. Meanwhile previously we saw a 4% reduction when going from DDR4 3400 to 3200, and then from 3200 down to 2800 a reduction in bandwidth by a further 7%. Here we see well under a 1% reduction in performance when testing the various memory timings using 7-zip. Finally, using Gears of War 4 we see virtually no difference in performance when tweaking the memory timings. So in the end, memory timings and frequency don't have a great impact on gaming performance. Therefore it really comes down to price. Given that there are quite large bandwidth gains to be had when going with faster memory, I would still recommend buying the fastest memory possible. I just don't recommend hitting yourself with any kind of serious price premium to get it. For example, G-Skill's Ripjaws 4 16GB dual channel DDR4 2133 kit starts at $85 US, but for $5 more you can purchase their Ripjaws 5 DDR4 3000 kit, and for another $5 lands you the Ripjaws 5 DDR4 3200 kit. Beyond that though, things do start to get a bit out of control. The cheapest DDR4 3400 kit, which is another Ripjaws 5 memory kit, costs $130. Not outlandish, but that's almost a 40% premium over the DDR4 3200 stuff for no real gain. As a side note, I'd just like to point out that G-Skill hasn't sponsored this video, but they have sent us a shipload of memory in the past, and with it being so competitively priced, it works well for these examples. So in summary, if pricing in your region reflects what we just saw, then I recommend pairing your KB Lake or Skylake processor with DDR4 3000 to 3200 memory. For the past year we've used DDR4 3200 memory in our Core i7 6700K test machine, and it's worked out very nicely. I will provide some links in the video description for some memory over at Amazon I recommend checking out. Anyway, that's all from me on this one. Just remember, get the fastest memory you can while avoiding spending a huge premium over the 2133 stuff. I'm your host Steve, and I hope to catch you on the next one.
Fresh food for the plants. Where's the excitement?
The shrine gathers power. Prepare to
Want it quiet, and you maybe not even, you might not have a lot of room or something like that. This was very, very surprising. It did well in the performance graph of 4.8 GHz. Let's face it, it's still a fairly lumpy graph. It did well in the graph, but it was just the performance numbers. And you need to remember those performance numbers with the fans running out. So, you know, they don't seem, you know, they're not 3,000 RPM service. But it does well. You might not like the yellow, you might love the yellow. That's one for the Bumblebee fans.
forces of evil are mighty.
So, lots of information, lots of stuff, lots of graphs, different fans, fan speed reducers, all kinds of stuff. All tested on the 7700K, and we did 4.8 GHz and 5
9 out of 10 people don't know this trick. We're going to show you the one thing electronic stores would hate for you to know. You won't believe how quickly you can double your RAM. Just 5 actual real tips.
We have lost a key. Our core is under attack.
Finally. Where's the excitement? I hear the call
Our
of
foe has summoned a mortar punisher.
I just love watching you build. Well, this was never your plan. Let's go.
Key lost. The enemy is attacking our core.
I hear the call of Alangor. Ah, fresh as a flower.
The enemy's punisher has been vanquished. Your spirit is strong. Double kill.
Growing strong.
Triple kill.
Nicely done. Time for some reading. Regrow. We should capture this mercenary. I seek the enemies of the forest. Let's befriend these mercenaries. Where's the excitement?
Their blackened edifice has fallen.
For the wilds. That hero must be taken out. And soon.
Another shrine will be active soon. Do not let our enemy claim it.
Hero must be taken out.
From my realm,
Growing strong.
Punisher's power to the high heavens.
Where's the excitement? Our ally needs help. A thorn in your side. For the wild.
Excellent. We have summoned a frozen Punisher to fight for us.
For the wilds.
Our keep has fallen. The enemy is attacking our core.
This was never good. Reclaims all.
Double kill. Triple kill. Well fought. Killing spree.
Let us storm this fort.
I am eternal. I will renew these lands. Well, I just love watching them work. I seek the enemies of the forest. That was worth waiting for. Let's retreat.
Power gathers within a shrine. Be ready, guys. Your resilience cannot be shaken. Go and claim the shrine. Show its guardians your resolve.
Zerd. Intruders.
Such daring!
Good, let's retreat. Well, taste my spear. For the wild.
Eliminated!
This was never.
The burning hells have slain
must
our
pull back.
Punisher.
I seek the enemies of the forest. A thorn in your side. Let's retreat. Fine then. Let's go. Taste my spear.
The enemy is attacking our core.